Diabetes Connections is brought to you by One Touch. Every touch is a step forward. By Dexcom, take control of your diabetes and live life to the fullest with Dexcom. By No Foods, No Grain, No Gluten, No Guilt. And by Audible, listening is the new reading.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, his endo called it a dumb, easy idea. A glucose gel necklace that is easy to carry, use, and is affordable.
I wanted to have something that was cheaper, easier, and I guess more accessible so that we are not needing to respond to so many on something that can be so easy to use.
Kris Maynard is planning to put the glucose necklace up for sale later this fall. We'll talk about the product, his experience as a first responder who lives with type 1. He's got some great advice, and the low he experienced that prompted this new product. Plus, my son has some words of advice about regular summer camp, not diabetes camp, and kids.
Stop worrying so much and send them to camp because they'll enjoy it and it's fun.
We had a fun conversation on the way to camp. I'll share it. Yeah, you never know what you're going to get with that one. And have you heard of Jessie Was Here? A new program from Beyond Type 1. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week. So glad to have you along. We aim to educate and inspire about type 1 diabetes by sharing stories of connection. You know we like to talk to movers and shakers in our community, celebrities and athletes and bloggers and authors, as well as everyday people living with diabetes, as well as asking some hard questions of healthcare companies and talking to the tech folks who are trying to move things along. My son was diagnosed right before he turned 2. He is now 13 and a half. My husband has type 2 diabetes. I don't have diabetes, but I have a background in broadcasting, and that's how you get the podcast. All right, so by the time you hear this podcast, if you're a regular listener, you know that my son is away at summer camp. Actually, by the time you hear this, Benny will be home. He will have been gone for 4 weeks. I have not had a Dexcom signal as I record this show since the beginning of June. Now, I am a bit superstitious, so I haven't talked a lot about the specifics of camp, and that's also why I haven't played the interview you're going to hear later in the show. We talked about it on the way to camp. I recorded an interview with Benny, but I didn't want to play it. Like I said, I'm superstitious basically telling you everything was okay. So you'll hear that later on. And we'll talk about how it went and what we learned from this summer when I get to do my annual debriefing with him. Maybe I shouldn't call it that. But when we go over what worked and what didn't, because, regular camp is different from diabetes camp. Do you remember the glucose necklace? You probably saw this. It was all over social media. I want to say last year. Maybe it was just earlier this year. It looks like, I describe it as a glow stick necklace. Bright colors, but you wear it as a necklace. It's got a medical alert medallion in the middle of it. The company is called Glucose Revival. I ran into them at the Friends for Life conference this summer. Chris, his wife, their kids, they were all there. It is a great story. I'm excited to bring you the story of how it came about. It's a necklace that contains liquid glucose. The idea is you don't even have to put anything in your pockets. You could just put it around your neck, go for a run or go on your boat or do whatever you're doing. And if you need it, you crack it open and you drink the liquid that's inside. So we'll bring you more about that. They're hoping for approval and to come to market this fall. All right, but first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by One Touch. One Touch has been a trusted brand in blood glucose management for more than 30 years. This past year, Pharmacy Times and U.S. News & World Report named One Touch as a #1 pharmacist-recommended brand in blood glucose monitoring devices based on a survey of pharmacists nationwide. Find out more about One Touch brand products at diabetes-connections.com and click on the One Touch logo. My guest this week is a former firefighter and first responder, and now he wants to help the diabetes community avoid calling for emergency help for low blood sugar. Kris Maynard invented a glucose necklace. This made a big stir when it showed up on social media last year, and now they are close to start selling, likely later this fall. I caught up with Kris and his wife Paula at the Friends for Life conference. Now, if the interview sounds a little echoey, we did it in that giant vendor hall that they have. So tell me the story here. I remember seeing this. How did it come about?
I've been a firefighter for 20 years. I've been a diabetic for 19 years. And so my last episode that I had of low blood sugar, I was camping with my kids in the middle of the forest in a tent, overate, took too much insulin, and next thing I know is I have an ambulance crew hovering over me, administering glucose gel within my mouth. So at that point, I figured I need to do something. I need to change how I'm living, and I need to have something easily accessible for my family to be able to take care of it. At that point during camping, my oldest son grabbed my glucagon pen, injected me with it, and there was no response to it. And that's the first time it had happened. So as a firefighter EMT, when we respond, we can't give injections. And so the only thing that we have within us that we can use to be able to help diabetics with low blood sugar is to use glucose gel. And we just simply rub it on the gums in the mouth. And so what I've done is I've made a medical alert necklace and put this glucose gel in the necklace now to make it easier for my family, friends, those around me, to where if I get into that state again, they can now administer using that.
Did you ever find out why the glucagon didn't work?
I wish I knew, because I've only heard of success stories with glucagon, and I would in no way reject glucagon by anyone, just because that is the known substance that everyone should have and use. But in all my responses over the years as an EMT, every response 100% of the time, nobody's ever had glucagon with them. And so in the response has always been, it's because it's too expensive. By prescription right now, it costs me around $250. And so I wanted to have something that was cheaper, easier, and I guess more accessible, so that we are not needing to respond to so many on something that can be so easy to use.
All right, so let's talk about the necklace. To describe it, it looks kind of like a glow stick necklace like you'd wear for Halloween. You know, bend it, snap it, stick it around your neck, right, with a medallion hanging from it. So tell me, what is inside? Like, what's this all about?
Well, I've taken what we use on scene for the low blood sugar and applied it within it. The simplicity of it, it's a tube with gel in it that easily is squeezed out. It can just be applied on the fingers and rubbed into the gums and then massaged using the cheek. As we have prototypes right now, we expect to launch in November for Diabetes Awareness Month. And we are getting our own glucose gel made, taking out some additives that are in some of the gels, because what I've learned is a lot of gels that are sold over the counter now have a lot of additives that slow that response time, because we are wanting to get something quick as we can.
If you're running, let's say, and you go low, you've got this around your neck, can you just literally click it open and drink it like straw? Do you have to put it on your fingers and rub it in your gums? Like, what do you do with it?
That was reason number 2 that we wanted it, because I do run quite a bit and bike. And so I wanted something that I can use for a minor low blood sugar or a severe. And so I pop it off. The finished product will be a magnetic attachment so that you can just rip it off from your chest and squeeze it out. And then if I'm running or biking, I will just squeeze it and swallow it. I don't need to use the gums. It's just that's one way to do it if I can't give it to myself.
Refillable? If I buy one of these and I bring it home, can I refill it? Is it reusable? Is it dishwasher safe? I'm not really sure.
No, that's a good question. And I certainly wish they could be refillable. But through the testing, we won't be allowed to refill them because of the process that it goes through to get the approval finalized.
Yeah, and let's talk about the approval. What needs to be approved here? Do you need to go through FDA or regulatory? I mean,
it's got to be made in an FDA facility. And then whatever we put on the packaging, it's got to be able to back up.
So where do you think people will be able to get it? I mean, obviously you want it everywhere.
Well, I don't want it in retail for the simple fact of, as diabetics, we pay 2.5 times more the cost for medical care than everyone else. And so it's going to be on our website, glucoserevival.com, and through Amazon.
Do you think there may be a point where you are able to develop it as a reusable product?
That's my hope, because I want to make it simple. I want to make it easy and affordable. So that's our goal. We tested the market a couple years ago because when I made this for myself, my endocrinologist said, in simple terms, that's a dumb, easy idea. You need to make this available to all diabetics. And so we took that tidbit from my endo and tested it, sending out messages by social media, seeing if people liked it, seeing if they had any wants for it. And after we learned that there was a need for it, then we started going through our prototypes and we started testing out different areas, what's the best, which brings us to today, now a couple years later.
Are you still working as a paramedic, firefighter? Are you still working on that? I'd love to ask you a couple of questions about that if I could, because we see a lot of questions online, and I've even gotten a few myself, although I'm obviously no expert, about what an EMT or what someone can do when they roll up. You mentioned you don't have glucagon, which I think surprises a lot of people because you can't inject. So my question would be, as a parent of a child with type 1, what can I do to help you if, God forbid, you need to come to my house for an emergency? Back to Kris in just a moment, but first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dexcom. And one of the best things about using the Dexcom G6 or G5 mobile CGM system is that share function. As a parent, a caregiver, friend, or spouse, when you want to help someone with diabetes, you can use that Dexcom Follow app and help the person you care about manage diabetes in real time. And as a parent, it gives me so much more peace of mind as we change things up. Benny's getting older, giving him more independence. It is an amazing safety net, especially overnights for me, and it gives us all peace of mind. You can use the Dexcom G5 or G6 mobile CGM system with iOS or Android now, and that Follow app as long as there's an internet connection. For more information, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. Now back to my interview with Kris Maynard.
As the American Diabetes Association recommends, every diabetic should carry a fast-acting glucose. And I would add that to the parents as well, something that can be quick and easy for the diabetic to use. Really, the most important thing for an EMT or a firefighter that's responding to help is just a simple let them know. Because we know the parents are just as excited, scared for their child. As long as we know what the problem is, it's quicker to be able to help and fix. So if the diabetic is conscious, then giving them that drink of pop, drink of juice, any type of gel that's out there that can help. Trying to keep the anxiety of the kid down, because any extra movement that the kid allows can help bring that sugar down more. And so we just want to bring a calmness and bring the awareness to the first responders as quick as we can.
Curious, can you speak to the medical alert jewelry? Because we're always wondering, do you really look for that? Does it have to, if it's anywhere but the wrist, is it worth wearing?
Well, to me, this is a touchy subject because do we look for it? Yes. Is it something that we pay attention to initially? No, because we're paying attention to what's most life-threatening, and we need to fix that. And so if it's a patient by himself that we don't know anything about, if they have that necklace, if they have that bracelet, and we can identify it knowing that they're a diabetic, then they get a quicker response from us.
Well, let me ask it this way. Before the necklace, did you wear one?
I wore one for about a year until it broke. Once it broke, after working as an EMT, it becomes kind of like if you have a medical alert, it becomes step one to be able to read to identify the problem. Whereas if you don't have one, usually on step 4, now you've figured out what the problem is. So it might save 30 seconds or so. And so the reason why we decided to bring our necklace into a medical alert is because now we have a medical alert now that can actually provide the solution to help with the problem, so that people, when they see it, can now help. Because now we don't want to wait those critical minutes of waiting for the EMS crews. So that if someone happens to fall down at the mall or movie theater, whatever it is, and someone can recognize it, then now they can help instead of waiting for those EMS crews.
I know, again, I'm going to assume you're going to speak for yourself and not every first responder in the country, so don't feel like you're speaking for everyone here. What about tattoos? Do tattoos help you identify people at all? Do they help?
I've never seen a first responder look for a tattoo because there is a lot of tattoos out there. And so they're kind of just looked past. But again, if it's something that catches the eye, then we'll use that information. But will that save us? It saves us maybe a few seconds to be able to identify and be able to help with the problem.
You don't have to answer this. It's kind of a personal question. But you mentioned your older son, who I assume was standing here a minute ago, gave you the glucagon and it didn't work. Have you guys talked about what that was like for him? I got to imagine he was terrified.
I've had low blood sugars before, and so they've experienced it enough, but that was his first time given the glucagon. They got their mom on the phone, and she kind of talked him through it. And so was he excited or scared to do it? No, I think he keeps his cool fairly well. And so I guess as them growing up with their dad having diabetes, they've learned to just accept it and respond well to it.
When everything calmed down and you all talked about how all the steps and what happened, I have to imagine you were pretty proud of him, though.
Absolutely. Many avenues throughout life with the diabetes, because, I mean, diabetes isn't just my problem. They're the ones that have to live with it just as much as I do. And so as my wife and both my kids live with this disease, to me, they're more the heroes than what anyone else is because of how impacted they are.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
More information on the glucose necklace on the company Glucose Revival, because they're doing a few more things behind the scenes. Some good videos out there. We will link that all up at diabetes-connections.com. And of course, in the show notes for every episode. And I say this all the time, but if you're new and you're listening perhaps on Facebook or through social media, the show notes are difficult to get that way. In fact, you can't get them that way. Go ahead and listen to whatever makes sense to you. If you want to keep listening through Facebook and get the episodes that way, terrific. But please know that I do put a lot of detail in every episode, links to everything we talk about, time codes, so you can see exactly where the interviews are. And that can all be found at diabetes-connections.com, as well as when we say podcast or show notes, talking about what pops up for a podcast app. So Apple Podcast or Stitcher or Google Play, wherever you would listen, you can click details or more here. It varies app to app, and you can find out more about the episode. If you're on Facebook and you're listening that way, do me a favor and join the Facebook group. It's Diabetes Connections, the group. Pretty easy to find, and it's a really cool community. I'm glad I started that. All right, in our Know Better segment this week, a new program from Beyond Type 1 called Jessie Was Here. Know Better is brought to you by No Foods. No Foods is based in Atlanta. I don't know if you knew that. They're not too far from me. And they are amazing. Non-GMO, grain and gluten-free, and exceedingly low glycemic index alternatives to traditional grain-based foods. I mean, bread slices, buns, waffles, wraps, donuts. I saw them make a key lime pie dessert using the cookies as the base. They do these awesome videos on Instagram and Facebook, and I always want to make the recipes. And it shows you how to use some of their products in ways you might not think. I think they made a macaroni and cheese hamburger bun a while back. Anyway, find out more. You can go to diabetes-connections.com, click on the No Foods logo, and remember, save with the promo code Stacey10 at checkout. Wanted to let you know about a new program that launched recently. It's called Jessie Was Here. This is a program of Beyond Type 1, and it was inspired by Michelle Page-Alswager's experience. We talked to Michelle. We've talked to her a couple of times here on the show, and we had her on to talk about riding on insulin, I believe for the first time, a program that she worked for and with for many years. But Michelle is perhaps best known in the community for the death of her 13-year-old son, Jesse, from type 1 diabetes. And this happened back in the year 2000. And Michelle has really just been an amazing part of the community since then, staying to help create Riding on Insulin, which was kind of motivated by the creator, the founder's relationship with her son, Jesse. We talked about that when we talked to the founder, Sean Busby, a while back as well. But Michelle has also kind of quietly been helping support parents who have also lost their children to type 1 diabetes. This is not something that you see in the public very much. You do see the posts or hear these stories. But I always wondered, where do these families go? Do they stay in the Facebook groups when we're all talking about the stress of overnights or, I'm doing this milestone now, or my son doesn't want to check his blood sugar. And, these families, they wish their children could have these struggles. And Michelle has really been doing an awful lot behind the scenes to help. And now she is out in the open to help. And now with the help of Beyond Type 1, she is going to be able to have a lot more resources for these families. So again, the program is Jessie Was Here. There are resources, everything from planning a service or creating a memorial fund, connecting with others who've experienced loss. This could also be due to a misdiagnosis. That does happen. Of course, we've talked about DKA and truly that's the most dangerous time for people with diabetes. Any type of diabetes is when it's not diagnosed correctly. And then opportunities to celebrate, which I think is pretty amazing for these families. They are taking donations. We will link it all up. And I know if you're like me, probably you've been distracted the entire time I'm talking because you want to know what happened. Right? You're thinking, as soon as I told you he died at the age of 13 from type 1, your brain went to, well, what happened? And I think we all do that because, frankly, we're scared and we want to protect ourselves, right? We want to say, well, I won't do that. I'll protect my child that way. But I'll link this up as well. Michelle wrote a pretty amazing column a while back called Page-Alswager's Cause of Death. And basically she says, don't ask. And she explains why. It's actually a really great column, and it's very helpful because we don't know what to say when something terrible like this happens. And I really commend her for writing it. She basically has said publicly it's not going to help anybody, so I don't talk about it. But she also says it's important to me, quote, that you remember Jessie was here and how he lived, not how he died. So you can certainly read that column. I would urge you to check out the Jessie Was Here portion over at Beyond Type 1. I will link that up as well. Hats off to Michelle and to Beyond Type 1 for dealing with this really difficult subject in a way that I know is going to help a lot of people. And now you know better. A few weeks ago, I took my son, Benny, to camp. He goes to regular sleepaway camp for 4 weeks every summer. I've told you this before. He's been doing this since he was 8 years old, although that year he only went for 2 weeks, I think. The youngest campers at this camp go for 2 weeks. Diabetes sleepaway camp for 1 week every year since he was 7 years old. And my kids are very independent, and camp is a huge tradition in our family. I went, my sister went, my husband went, my dad went. So it's really part of our lives. And my daughter has been going since age 8. She is now going into her senior year of high school, and she spent 5 weeks this summer at a leadership camp in New York, which was a really cool experience. But of course, diabetes makes things a little bit more challenging. Now, I will talk a bit more about my take on this conversation after you hear from Benny. I try very hard not to filter what he says. I've heard from a bunch of you who really like when he comes on the show. I don't want to put him on too much, mostly because the editing of the silliness takes a long time. I left some of it in, but, I would imagine that 45 minutes of this would not be helpful. Anyway, we had this discussion on the way to camp. It was in the car, so pardon the road noise, pardon his fascination with billboards as we pass, and maybe keep in mind that it's been, as we're talking here, it's been a year since he's been to this camp, so I'm not sure his memory is that good. You'll understand when he talks about how he manages some things at camp, and I get to have the last word here. I'm going to come back after the interview and clarify. So let's talk about camp.
We're talking about camp.
Think back if you could, because this is year 6, which is crazy.
Okay.
Why did you want to go to this camp in the first place?
Because Yaya went.
Your sister Leah?
Yaya.
But seriously, is that why? Do you remember her talking about it? Yeah.
That's really the only reason I ever went.
Do you remember thinking or I don't know, do you remember how much planning we had to do the first year, or did that just totally go by you? Good. All right, so what's it like at camp? You've been doing this.
Fine.
Okay, I know, but you've been doing this for 5 years. Let's talk about diabetes first, or you want to talk about actual camp first?
I don't care.
All right, so let's talk about camp itself. What is this camp like? What do you do at this camp?
Normal stuff.
So it's
plus
like sports. Okay, so let's sports and theater and the cool stuff, right?
Zip lines.
What?
We have zip lines.
Okay.
And Gaga Ball.
And you go whitewater rafting.
Oh yeah, that.
And you said MAC. You want to explain what that is?
Color War!
You want to explain what that is?
The camp is split up into 2, 3, or 4 teams, depending on whatever they feel like. And everybody's a different color. And then they have, like, activities in where you earn points, and the people with the most points win.
Camp-wide competition.
And then everybody gets ice cream.
What have you done in the competition?
I've done Gaga Ball for our team. I did this thing where you had to blow bubbles with, like, the worst bubble-blowing gum in existence. And then I ate a peanut butter jelly sandwich in one bite. And then I made the biggest cannonball.
Oh, that's a good one. Didn't you do tug of war one year?
Oh, I do tug of war every year.
So is Mac the high point of camp?
Yeah.
You love it? Have you ever won it?
I've won it all but twice.
Okay. All right. Let's talk diabetes at camp.
She said, son, will you play me a memory?
We've been listening to Billy Joel in the car.
I'm not pretty sure how it goes.
What,
But it's sad and it's sweet, and
I knew this was going to be a disaster.
When I wore younger man's clothes.
So do you remember the first year when you went? We had to take a lot of precautions.
I don't remember anything from my first year.
Oh, the first year was when they watched what you ate.
Oh, that sucked.
You remember that. All right, so they would look at what you ate because we were all really afraid. How are we going to count carbs and dose insulin at a place where nobody else is counting carbs and dosing insulin? So the first year, I got the menu from camp, and I looked up all of the carb counts.
And it was completely wrong.
Well, it was their fault. They told me what they were serving on each day. So I did my very best. And then they would watch what you ate.
That's a cool car.
Which I would imagine is pretty annoying. So we changed that. So tell me about your routine now at camp in terms of diabetes.
Every 2 days, I change my inset. That's the only routine thing I do.
Well, and that's one of the improvements we made because you don't have to remember to do that. They bring it to you. Like when everybody's getting their meds at dinner, which is pretty common at camp, they bring everything in. They bring you an inset. And we do it every 2 days at camp, every 3 days at home, just so we make sure it's working well at camp. So what do you do about blood sugar checks and that sort of thing? You roll out of bed and you ignore everything?
Yeah.
No, come on, talk to me.
I ignore everything until I get to breakfast. I look at my CGM, and I bolus for that and 20 carbs.
Wait. You wait till you get... So in other words, you wake up, you brush your teeth, you get dressed, you walk from the cabin to the dining hall.
Yeah.
Which is probably, depending on where you are, a 5 to 10 minute walk.
It's like 3.
A 3 minute walk, okay.
And
then you look at your CGM.
Yeah.
Can I give you some friendly advice?
Yeah.
Can you look at it when you roll out of bed?
No. That's dumb.
And then you have breakfast. So you bolus 20 carbs when you walk in because you're trying to pre-bolus without knowing really what you're eating?
Yeah.
That work out okay for you? Believe it or not, Benny, there are people with type 1 diabetes your age who don't go to summer camp, or they haven't been yet, and their parents are thinking about sending them. So it's possible that they may hear this and, I don't know how, but learn something. Or maybe take our experience and say, we're not going to do it that way because those people are crazy.
I have one thing to say for the parents with children that have diabetes that are above the age of 12. Stop worrying so much and send them to camp because they'll enjoy it and it's fun.
Why 12? You started going to sleepaway camp when you were 8. Should I not have done that?
No, you guys just don't care about me.
This is like therapy on the radio. This is wonderful. Oh my gosh. So let's talk a little bit about supplies. When you take care of stuff, like you have to refill insulin, whatever, you need supplies. We leave most of that at the health center.
Yeah.
But I give you a Camelback.
Yeah.
There's water in it. It's a good little backpack for that. Do you actually carry it with you?
No.
I'm going to kill you. What do you do all day with it? Like you leave
with
that
the
in
Camelback?
Yeah.
I bring it with me for water.
But you don't have diabetes stuff in it?
No.
Do you think you might consider that, like as a helpful idea?
No.
What if you're in the middle of Gaga Ball and you run out of insulin in your pocket?
I wait until the round is done, and then the nurse's office is literally right up the hill from Gaga.
Bad example.
Yeah, I know.
So what I'm learning from this interview is that I should probably turn the car around because you're not doing what I think you're doing.
You mean.
So what happens if you're not feeling well or stuff goes wrong with diabetes?
Well, I look at my CGM first.
Okay.
And see if I'm high or low. If I'm high, I give myself insulin. If I'm low, I go to the nurse's office. Or back to my cabin, depending on which one is closer.
You know, if you had stuff in your Camelback, you could treat right where you are if you were low.
But juice boxes burst in my Camelback.
Yeah, but you could have, like, tabs or something.
Tabs taste bread.
Okay. Have you ever had a situation at camp that you remember where it wasn't that simple? where you were high for a long time and felt really gross, you were low for a really long time and needed help?
2 years ago, I went low every night at about 1 o'clock in the morning. I'd have to wake my counselors up. I was like 60. I'd climb from the top bunk, wake them up, and they'd get a golf cart every night.
What we learned from that was that we need to adjust basal rates while Benny's at camp. And 1 year, we were extremely lucky that a mom of a type 1 kid was one of the nurses. And they also used the Animus pump, which we used at the time.
Oh, yeah.
You remember her? I can't remember her name. So she helps me change your basal rates. But what we started doing last year, which I think is really helpful, is that we touch base every Sunday. And, at this camp, people don't call home, even weekly. But you will call me, and we go over the basal rates. So if you're having all these lows at night, we can adjust and figure it out. And that's helpful. I also bought you these shelves that go on your bunk that have all the low supplies and stuff in them.
What shelves?
The fabric shelves.
No, those have my clothes in them.
No, the blue ones that hang down.
I don't put my diabetes supplies in there.
What do you put in there?
Like junk and stuff.
Okay. When I leave for camp, all your diabetes stuff, when I leave you at camp.
No, diabetes, like the juice boxes and stuff?
No, not the juice boxes, but like your meter, a flashlight. Like, you could put a juice box in there.
Oh, I don't think of that as diabetes supplies. I think of that as my meter. When you say diabetes supplies, I think like insets. Okay, and that's the smallest Jeep I've ever seen.
Okay, yeah, that is a tiny Jeep.
That's smaller than the golf cart.
It's pulling a golf cart.
It's pulling a golf cart that is bigger than it.
I'm not sure this was the best idea because I feel like we're doing everything wrong at camp. But you've done great. I mean, you really have. So you can't use your phone at camp. Oh, this is new information.
Yeah.
So you use your receiver. I'm curious, does that really affect you or how you look at your numbers? It's all pretty much the same to you, right? Just that I can't see them.
And I'm happy about that.
Tell me about that. Is that kind of a relief that your mother's not watching over everything all month?
No, because then you worry even more, and you're like, in your head, you're going, oh my God, he's dying! And then your body's sitting still.
I do worry about you every day. The first year you went, I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning for a week, like in panic, thinking this was the worst decision I ever made.
Because it was.
What are some things that you've learned or that I could do to help make camp easier for you?
Okay, so there's one time, do you remember the migraine one? Where she wouldn't let me have my leave?
Yeah, but that's different.
Yeah, okay, so...
That's a different health condition issue.
Whatever.
Benny also occasionally gets migraines. It's much better now that he's older, but it was really a problem when he was younger. And we've had some run-ins with people who think that he does not need his medication.
They're dumb.
That's not good. Okay, go ahead.
So, I wanted a bag of Smart Pop, and it was like the tiny little one-serving bags.
I know. We've been seeing all these crazy cars towing other cars. I've never seen a car or a truck towing 2 cars behind it, not being a professional tow truck. That's like the 6th we've seen. Is this a South Carolina thing? I know there's one there, too. I think this is a South Carolina thing. South Carolina people, hit me up. Is there like a non-union thing in this state where anybody can tow anybody? Maybe that's what's going on. That dude is not a professional tow truck. He's just towing trucks.
They're not trucks, Mom.
Well,
they're
those
cars.
are SUVs. Okay, anyway.
Okay, so I wanted a bag of Smart Pop, and the nurses are really nice and let me have one. And this one nurse says, can you have that? I said, yes. And then she said, make sure you bolus for the sugars. And that, first off, I hate the way people say sugars.
Yeah.
It just sounds wrong.
I'm not a fan of that.
And then I say to her, my doctor told me to bolus for carbs, because I'm not going to argue with her. She's obviously uninformed. And she starts to get in an argument with me over how my doctor is wrong and we need to stop seeing him because he's not smart and that I need to bolus for my sugars. I hate saying that word.
You can't even say you're like, sugars.
And then she, just out of the blue, she's like, what's your A1C? I'm like, 7?
I think at the time you didn't even know what it was, remember? You were like,
yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know. I had no clue what it was. And then I walked away.
In the original version of that story, you told me you walked away and found somebody who would give you the Smart Pop and not bother you.
Well, no, I ate the Smart Pop. Like, I walked away eating the Smart Pop.
So what did you learn from that?
People are uninformed and people who are uninformed should get informed.
Yeah,
before thinking they know everything.
It's hard, though, because as a kid, you have to be respectful of adults. I mean, I know you're saying things here like she's dumb and blah, 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 but you were, from what I understand, you were polite to her face and you were respectful, right? Do I have to beat you right now?
Yes.
Well, I've never heard anybody tell me that you were rude to them at camp, but I think that's one of the biggest things you've had to learn from a non-diabetes camp is the experience is that most people have no idea. Even some medical professionals have no idea.
And the people who do think they have an idea think they're right, and they're not.
Yeah.
I hate people like that.
Sometimes the most ill-informed are the most stubborn and sure of themselves when they don't really know. But you're going to have to deal with that for the rest of your life, unfortunately.
See,
so.
I like the people who are like, I have no clue about anything. Can you tell me some stuff?
Is that how most of your counselors are?
That's how most of the people I've met are.
I would imagine that it makes them a little bit nervous at first until they kind of realize that you're
I
okay.
fell out of my bed twice with him as my mom.
But you fell out of your bed because you're Benny, not because you had diabetes.
Yeah.
Okay, let's be clear. I remember once you were little and I just heard upstairs. I was like, what the heck? I went up and you were on the floor sound asleep. All right, I think we're almost done here. Is there anything else I missed? Anything you want to... Oh, tell me about eating at camp, because nobody watches you anymore.
Food tastes really good.
And you like this. See, when I went to camp, the food was so gross. We used to, try to get to breakfast early because you'd get boxed cereals, and that was, the best meal
We always
of the day.
get boxed cereal.
Yeah, I know, but your food is good, so you don't have to scrounge for the Frosted Flakes, because,
I mean, everybody does anyway, but...
Yeah, but your food is pretty good, which is kind of a problem, because you could have... Well, not you personally, but, your sister snuck, 10 cookies one time.
She didn't sneak them.
She just ate them in full view of everybody?
No, okay, so what happened was she was melting and giving her table cookies.
Melting means, waitstaff.
And every time she brought a new bowl of cookies to them, they gave her one.
Ah. So how do you feel about the way you're handling dosing right now? You're confident with it? You feel good about stuff?
Yeah. That's
You
a
do.
funny review. It's a tin can!
It's an Airstream.
No, it's a tin can.
Yeah, but the brand is Airstream. It's pretty cool. Your dad loves those.
Tin can.
All right, well, thank you for sharing your camp experiences with us. I think the moral of the story is be safe. In some cases, do the opposite of what we have done. And that your kids are resilient, and even my son, who apparently is not following the guidelines I lay out for him,
It works!
is doing just fine. And don't forget, I can see his blood sugars. He's worn a CGM for the past, 4 or 5 years, and his blood sugars, honestly, are just a little bit higher on average than they are at home, which is fine with me, because one of the things we do is we do move his target up a little bit, and we do decrease his basals across the board for activity. So, good stuff. I'm proud of you, man, but I'm still going to worry about you every day.
Something, Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.
Thank you.
As I said before the interview, I get the last word. And I just want to go on record that it's not as loosey-goosey as Benny makes it out to be. I mean, there is a medical staff there. They were not trained in type 1. We did tons of education to get everybody ready. We had to do a ton of work to send him to camp. But they are caring people who pay attention. So he is not quite as nonchalant as he may make it out to seem. And when I dropped him off, I did have a meeting, as I always do, with his counselors, with the medical staff. We went over everything. So I'm glad that he feels as comfortable and casual as he does. I'm going to take that as a good thing from a 13-year-old. Because the last thing I want is him to feel like we're really clamping down on him. But I also don't want you to think that I just dump him off at camp and let him not have supplies in his backpack and, that sort of thing. So it's an interesting balance as usual. And just to clarify something, I mentioned I can see his CGM and his numbers aren't all that much different from when he's home. What I meant there is that I download the receiver when he gets home and I can see the trends and how he did at camp. And for the most part, he usually runs just a little bit higher than he does at home, which is kind of by design. I mean, we do adjust basal, we do adjust target rates when he's at camp to make sure he doesn't go low with all of the extra activity. I do not remote monitor at camp. You can't do that. There's no cell service up there. It would not be practical. But let me tell you, I grab that receiver as soon as I can. I mean, he's probably back in the house maybe 20 minutes. If I can sneak it, I try not to let him know because I don't want to be like, oh, great, I'm so glad you're home. Give me that. How is diabetes? I'm sure I'm not subtle at all, but I don't tell him or talk about it. I just try to grab it. This year, I'll probably have to wait until the next morning when he sleeps until noon to see how he did. But yeah, I can't lie about that. I'm really curious what his blood sugar has been like, and I do grab that receiver as soon as I can. Quick reminder that Diabetes Connections is also brought to you by Audible. Please check out the links in the show notes or at diabetes-connections.com. Listeners of the show are eligible for 1 free month of Audible with 1 free download. Basically, all the books that you can find on Amazon are available in audio form on Audible. So go ahead and check that out. I am still listening to Calypso by David Sedaris, which cracked me up. Definitely not for the kids, but a great, great read, or great listen, I guess I should say. Let me know what you're reading. Love to get some recommendations, a book list going. It's a lot of fun. I've always done books on tape, way back when they actually were on tape, or CD. I guess CD. I didn't really do them on tape. But I like listening. I like podcasts, obviously. Big thank you to my editor, to John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions, and a big thank you to you as you listen. In the coming weeks, we have a lot of great interviews for you. We have Safe at School, talking to the American Diabetes Association with a focus on daycare. That's a difficult one, having sent my kiddo back to daycare a week after he was diagnosed at 23 months. It's not easy. So I really wanted to nail down the policies and the laws regarding daycare. And we'll talk about school in 504 as well. That's scheduled for next week. I also have an interview coming up all about the nasal glucagon. No more glucagon shots. You just squirt it up your nose. It's in front of the FDA right now, and they're anticipating an approval. No timeline for that, obviously. It's in the FDA's lap now, and we'll have that interview for you in the near future as well. Always let me know what you think. You can join the Facebook group. That's the quickest way to communicate with me. Diabetes Connections, the group, or any social media outlet. We are on Twitter and Instagram. Instagram is Stacey Sims. The other social media platforms have the Diabetes Connections and Stacey Sims. So I guess it's a little confusing there, but you'll find me. And you can always email me, Stacey@diabetes-connections.com. Thanks for listening. I'm Stacey Sims. I'll see you back here next week.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.